PLD PJ Campbell. Two mediocre white dudes on film. Because frankly, we know you don't have enough of that in your life. So we're here to give you more. And without further ado, here are two mediocre white dudes on film.
It's too early for this shit.
Up, everybody.
It's too early for this shit today, is what it is.
We're not too old for this shit, but it is too early for this shit.
Well, okay, so the last time we did this, because we've been off, we've had stuff going on. Daylight savings time hadn't gone into effect, so now I'm 3 hours behind you instead of 2 because Arizona just doesn't do daylight savings time. So we don't change either direction. We just stay the same. We're kind of like Matthew McConaughey in Dazed and Confused. And so
are you calling me a high school girl?
Same age.
No, you're a high school girl. I'm Matthew McConaughey is right. I changed. You get to the same age. So
yeah,
I'm Matthew McConaughey.
You want to? I mean, I can be a high school girl if you want me to. That's in this year, right? I don't know. So anyway, we don't do the thing like everyone else, and so it puts me at a disadvantage where I could wake up at 9 o'clock instead of 8 o'clock to get ready for this shit.
Well, I appreciate you for.
I hate you so much.
I mean, granted, I'm a guy who works overnight, so this is kind of like.
I don't want to hear your excuses. I don't care if you work overnight.
Similar time. I'm doing the same thing you are. I'm getting up earlier for this shit. But
you know what? Whatever. You just had to one up me, didn't you?
I always do. That's just my job in life here.
I haven't showed you this yet. In the audio listeners, it won't make any sense. But this is a Army of Darkness souvenir cup that Fright Rags made to look like the old cups that you would have gotten if you went to the theater.
Right. Yep.
And I was the most happy in the world that they decided to do that as a thing. It was $8, and I was like, yes, I will spend $8 and now only drink out of a cup that has Bruce Campbell on it twice.
That's right, twice. Speaking of that, I know Evil Dead's coming out soon. Are you excited?
I am. It's interesting because I don't love the Fede Alvarez movie.
I've heard that.
I think it's super handsomely made. It definitely ratchets up to the idea of the ultimate, the ultimate grueling terror tagline that the original had. It really goes for it, and that's great. But I miss that tongue-in-cheek nature that I so love about the series with Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness and even Ash vs. Evil Dead. But that being said, I know that Evil Dead Rise going in is going to be that very serious movie, and knowing that has shifted my expectations enough where I can try to just go in and accept it for that instead of trying to hold it to what I want it to be. I know what it's going to be, and they're look, there's really no comedy. And that, you know what? Cool, great. That's fine. I can deal with that. Knowing it going in will help me considerably. But I've loved all the marketing. I thought the marketing is great. It looks super fucking dope. Do I think we've seen a lot of the movie in the trailer? Yeah, probably. But I think we've seen less than we realize. And look, man, it's a new Evil Dead movie. And how can I not be excited? It's the 5th one in the franchise.
Absolutely. I have 2 responses to you. A, I'm going to put this all out here. Of course, that was basically just a bit for the show because it's not like we haven't talked about it. It's I asked you, are you excited?
Shit,
we haven't talked about this for all.
You got me going. You put out Army of Darkness and Evil Dead, and you're like, please talk about it. I mean, I will talk about it.
The second thing is, this actually ties into a conversation we've been having. You talked about Evil Dead, what your dislikes were for Fede Alvarez's, and how seeing that has gotten you ready for Evil Dead 5 as you were. That's exactly for me with the John Wick movies. We had this conversation before.
Book of the Dead tattoo now.
I see that. It's nice.
Yeah,
I remember when I first saw John Wick 3, I didn't love it like you did for the exact same reasons. I preferred the very simplicity of the first film, the more emotional stakes of the first film. But 3 really got me ready, and I rewatched 3, liked it a lot more, to go in to see 4, John Wick 4. And I love John Wick Chapter 4, even though it is completely bizarre, bonkers, ridiculous in comparison to the simplicity of the first story.
I love
So,
that franchise has just like gone so massively bonkers to the
yeah,
point you're like, what the hell? Like that first movie is like a small revenge movie.
right, which is
And
why I
now look
love it
at what
so
it's
much.
become. Now I love all four of them. Like I
I do
really do.
too. Now I really do. It's about changing my perception of things. Like I kind
Yeah.
of like I accept what it's going for now. Whereas like in my heart, I still preferred the first one, but I really do love the bonkersness of how it's gotten to this point.
I
So
I think 3 and 4 are 2 of the best American action films ever made. I really legitimately mean that. I think they're both masterpieces of what they set out to do, and they actually enter a very specific pantheon of action sequels that don't just turn the franchise on their head, but, like, are actively great doing it. Like,
right,
it's Aliens, it's T2, like, there's a very specific group of action films, right? That have sequels that are on that level. Lethal Weapon 2 is on that level
yeah,
from like, the not a single one of the Die Hard movies has one of those, but, like, now we have 2 John Wick movies that do. Now, The Raid is also one of those,
yes, agreed.
but not American, and, of course, Mission Impossible: Rogue Nation and Mission Impossible: Fallout. Like,
Yep.
you look at those, and they both turn the entire franchise on their head. A lot of people are gonna say Ghost Protocol, and I think Ghost Protocol is very good, but I think that Fallout and Rogue Nation are stronger movies overall, and I think that they ratchet the franchise up in a direction that, like, is very different to me. McQuarrie is a more this is gonna sound backhanded, and I don't mean it to Brad Bird this way, but he's a more even-keeled filmmaker overall, and I think that he took everything in the first 4 films, put them in a blender, and made it work better than they've ever worked before.
I'll say two things to that. A, interesting. I think we're gonna have a very interesting conversation when we eventually do the Mission Impossible franchise, which I bet we would do next year when the final Tom Cruise Mission Impossible movie comes out. Maybe we'll do it then. I don't disagree with you. I actually, as a big fan of Brad Bird, I love Brad Bird, and I actually am one who does love Ghost Protocol quite a bit. I actually do put it up with the last two.
I like it too, I just don't
Um,
think it's as good as the other 2, that's all.
we're a little bit on different levels, and that's fine. But I definitely think that McQuarrie is better suited for this than Bird was. Bird is, I mean, I'm a big lover of what Brad Bird does, and I think Tomorrowland is one of the most underrated movies of the last decade. I really love that movie. I love this. I know it's schmaltzy, but I love all of it. All the schmaltz. Give it all to me. But I guess I definitely see what you mean about how it's gone forth. But like compared to John Wick, same type thing. The sequels that really took themselves seriously and ramped it up and were successful at ramping it up without going too far. If there isn't too far, it's kind of funny you say. I took my brother to see it. My brother, who is honestly speaking, I love him, but he's very hard on movies. We have conversations afterwards, and he always jokes with me about being very much easier to please than him, and I'm very forgiving. And it's true. It's true. I just enjoy the
I
fun
used
of
to
it.
get shit for that too, and then people just realize that, like, there's no making fun of me. I've embraced that I just
Right?
like shit.
I just find out he doesn't even make fun of me. He just likes the fact he's like you're pretty easy to please. So generally speaking, when we come out of a movie, I'm probably gonna like it more than he does because he's very critical on things. He came out and said this is maybe one of the top 5 action films in his life that he's ever seen. So
Yeah.
that says something to me. Like
I mean, look, man, Chad Stahelski can get it. The
yeah,
dude is stupid talented, and it just once again, we've had this conversation here, we've had it privately. I really want to know where the change between him and David Leitch happened because they
yeah,
both took very different things from the first John Wick as an experience,
yeah.
and one is a much better filmmaker than the other. And it doesn't even matter that Stahelski hasn't done anything outside of Wick because he's continually evolved that franchise with every movie and every installment. Like he
1,000%.
has changed as a director every single time.
You can see legitimately like influences from so many different levels in this fourth
Dude,
film.
they the fact of the matter is that they looked at Sergio Leone
Hmm.
and Buster Keaton. Like,
Hmm.
what you took 2 totally separate things and decided to mash them together for 3 hours,
Hmm.
and it works. Like, the
Absolutely.
fact that the movie is so in on its own joke at this point on we know that it's bonkers and we know it's crazy, so they leaned on the Buster Keaton, like, almost just exhaustive nature of him like throwing himself down the stairs and the stuff that Buster Keaton could do. And you mix that with like the grand epics that Sergio Leone would do, down to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And you're like, oh shit, that's the movie he made.
Right.
And it's clear as day when you watch it. And it's so impressive.
It is. I want to cut you off a little bit now because I don't want to get too far into John Wick 4 because we are actually going to be doing the series of John Wick pretty soon, to be honest with you. So we should save this conversation.
I'm just talking about.
I know.
Cool though.
It is. It is. I just don't want to get too much in depth. I want to say it for that episode.
All right, Sum 41, calm down. We're in too deep. I need you
in too deep.
Yeah.
Last thing I do want to say this, though, is your conversation about Chad and only doing John Wick. I agree with you. That doesn't matter because he's shown his growth. At the same time, I'm very interested to see what he would do outside of the franchise as well.
Well, now we're going to finally find out because, I mean, Wick 4 ends in a pretty definitive place. So, you know, I mean, there's some wiggle room. Obviously.
There's some breadcrumbs in that universe.
There's some breadcrumbs, but like, it's pretty definitive for now until he decides to come back. But I'm like, look, he's been working on Highlander for a minute. He's been working on Ghost of Tsushima for a minute. He's going to be doing Rainbow Six with Michael B. Jordan. Like the dude's got all sorts of stuff that he's signed on to or like attached to in some capacity. Right. And now he's talking about turning Highlander into a TV show instead of a movie, which I think is very interesting.
Well, it had a successful TV run back in the day. I mean, you can argue with the how good that series was. Some people love it. Some people are like, think it's forgettable.
I mean, it's probably overall the most consistently good Highlander ever was in its lifetime outside of the original movie.
You're not wrong. You're definitely not wrong there.
No, and I say that as someone who fucking loves the original Highlander and will like pretty much go to bat for 3 and 4, even though they're not necessarily good.
Right.
Like, I really love the Highlander franchise. Like I've made that no secret on here. Highlander is one of my all-time favorites. That movie had a huge effect on me as a kid.
Absolutely.
Like I fucked with those movies. They're incredible.
Of course, you know what I'd want to see Chad do?
Huh?
I want to see Chad do the reboot of The Crow.
I mean, I wouldn't hate that. I won't lie to you.
Because he was friends with Brandon Lee. Actually, he was friends with Brandon Lee and actually went to the academy with him. And that just seems like right up his alley and right up what could possibly. I can imagine the aesthetic he could put on that. That would just be amazing.
I keep forgetting that movie is actually finally coming out.
I know.
Is that bad?
No, it's not. Because you know what? Quite frankly, with all the stops and starts we've had with this one, this is like beyond what most stops and starts of films have been. Let's be honest.
Yeah, but I mean, it's shot at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the Crow reboot is, as far as we know, been shot. We have not heard much since, but it has been shot.
It was wrapped filming in September, I think it was, right? Yeah, wrapped production in September.
I'm pretty sure. And who's playing the Crow in that again?
It is Bill Skarsgård.
I was going to say, it's Bill Skarsgård, right? From John Wick 4, who plays the Marquis. Yeah. Perfect. And of course, for those who haven't seen it yet, he was also Pennywise in the It movies. Yeah. The theatrical ones, not the Tim Curry movie, obviously.
Right. Danny Houston's in it. That's also, which is always a good casting. It's directed by Rupert Sanders, who did, of course,
Ghost
Snow
in the
White.
Shell. That seems not.
Yeah, Snow White and the Huntsman. He did
that seems backwards.
Foundation, the show on Apple TV, which I haven't seen yet, but I kind of want to. The first episode of Foundation. Yeah, that's why I would rather have seen Chad do it, but who knows? Never know. Look. Sometimes film directors could just do it and get it right finally after a couple of false starts.
I just don't trust it. I'm going to be honest with you.
I'm not going to lie. I'm not exactly a fan of the idea. I love the first.
Well, you also love The Crow, very specifically. You love The Crow, so and, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right. And I really dislike the sequel, to be honest with you. So that tells you how much I
think I've only seen each of the sequels once. And I don't remember much about any of them.
I love the first film so much. I really dislike the second film quite a bit that I don't even know if I finished all the sequels. I think I watched one of the other sequels and I kind of didn't watch the rest. I probably should.
One of them had Edward Furlong and David Boreanaz.
And one of them had Kirsten Dunst,
that's the third one.
Kirsten Dunst was in the other one, or one of the other ones, I think, if I remember correctly.
I just know that they were all like varying levels of bad. Like they're Children of the Corn. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Children of the Corn had like a single pretty okay movie.
Yeah. Right. The original.
And I have that movie. Like, every once in a while, I feel like watching Children of the Corn because Children of the Corn.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But, like, man, I just can't with the rest of those. And there's a new Children of the Corn out right now on Shudder.
Oh, is it out already?
Yeah.
Wow, it came and went. I didn't hear much about it. I remember
Well,
it coming
yeah, I
out.
remember it sat on a shelf for
Forever.
ever.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, when films sit on a shelf, it's usually not a good thing. Like, very rarely is it just that a studio has shuttered itself and the movie just needs to find a new distributor. Like, usually if something sits on a shelf for a long time, it's because they know they have a massive dud on their hands and they aren't sure what to do with it.
Yeah.
It does not happen a lot, but over the last couple of years, there's been quite a few of those, and this is one of them. Like, this movie was supposed to come out in like 2019, I think, or 2020,
Oof, oof.
and it's now 2023.
Oof. Real quick, just to bring it back to the Crow for a second, I looked up The Crow's Salvation. That's the one Kirsten Dunst was in. I was confirming that I was right. But I'm surprised at some of the cast members of this. William Atherton's in it. Walton Goggins is in it. We got Fred Ward in it.
Fred Ward.
Right? Wow. I didn't realize that.
Wow.
I have to go back for that one.
I mean, do you?
Yeah, I will. I think I will have to at some point go back. There was actually a television series, Crow, also. Stairway to Heaven, I believe.
Yeah, Stairway to Heaven. It only lasted a season.
That's not surprising.
I mean, Mortal Kombat had a TV show too. Do people remember that?
Nope, barely. We do, but barely. Barely.
Dude, between that and the live action TMNT show, remember that too?
Oh yeah, that's right.
Right around the same time, man. They were taking all sorts of them. RoboCop had one. Like,
yeah,
Total Recall had one.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm pulling all these out of the back of my head where it's like, yeah, quite a few of them had like weird live action adaptations that lasted like a season.
Wow. Holy cow.
Yeah, well, this is what you hired me for.
I know.
Useless information and shit.
It's very useful, as much as it is useful that we talk about the unmade Crow films, such as Rob Zombie's Crow 2037, which never was made.
I would have watched that. That script is wild.
That does. I actually could see that actually working, to be honest with you.
Now there's something Rob Zombie would have been really good at.
Potentially very good at. Yes, absolutely.
I would have watched that. And again, the script is wild. Like, if you've ever had a chance to read it, that's a wild script.
Absolutely.
I'm a big fan. It's on the level of the unmade movies that make me sad. Like, are you buzzing over there?
I am buzzing a little bit. Looks like I'm getting a phone call. So yeah, I'll pause. Let me pause it.
I was like, the hell's happening over there?
Let me pause it.
Oh my God.
Hello.
For those who don't know right now, PLD is taking a phone call, and it's definitely someone calling about extending his auto warranty, probably, is my guess, because apparently PLD has been driving nonstop lately without auto insurance. So I assume that is what is happening right now. They're calling about his auto insurance. Either that or he forgot to pay for his new MoviePass account. Maybe his card got declined, because I don't know if you guys heard, but MoviePass has made a comeback. I don't know why, but they're here apparently to stay, is what they say. I thought about signing up for it, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. There's just something about it that just still gets under my skin, and I'm not really feeling the love for MoviePass these days. I still look back at MoviePass with fond memories and the things that I did with it, but there's that. I kept vamping. You're not going to be able to cut any of it out. I'm just letting you know.
I just kept talking. I'm going to cut it.
No, please don't, because it's really funny, because it's me being like, they called about your auto insurance, and then I started waxing poetic about MoviePass and its return. So you have to leave it all in.
I'm sorry, I had to take it. I didn't know the number with the situation going on. I wasn't sure. Maybe I should get it. Maybe I shouldn't. But either way, it's on.
Well, it was about your auto insurance, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I fucking knew it. Love it. So anyway, in the 90s, there was a lot of that stuff going on, and that's so funny to me, because you sit there and you're just going, how? Why? Like, they were taking everything. Even The Outsiders had a TV show.
Right. Yeah, I do remember that, actually. I don't remember these until you mentioned them. I'm like, yeah, that's right. Absolutely did.
Yeah. Wow. Which brings me to Tango and Cash.
Wow.
Which was originally supposed to star Patrick Swayze in the Kurt Russell role. Oh, yes. Look at that. Look at that wraparound.
That, my friend, was well done. It's usually me trying to drag us back. You circled it back so perfectly. I'm very proud of you, my friend.
Thank you. That was a hell of a like wraparound to go from look at all these shitty TV shows we made based on movies in the 90s to, by the way, Patrick Swayze was originally supposed to be in Tango and Cash.
That's
Let's
right.
talk about it. So anyway, yeah, we actually never even told everyone last week what we were going to be talking about this week.
You didn't.
But this week we are talking about the 1989 American action thriller Tango and Cash, starring Sylvester Stallone and Kurt Russell, directed by Andrei Konchalovsky, a Russian filmmaker who I've really never seen anything he's done outside of Tango and Cash. But this was a movie that was fraught with problems from the beginning. John Peters, of course, of the infamous The Death of Superman Lives debacle of the 90s. He's a very notorious producer in Hollywood who asks for incredibly weird things like giant metallic spiders being added into movies.
Yes.
If you know where that started, it started with Superman and it ended with Wild Wild West. Somehow we got there.
To wonderful effect, yes, somehow.
Yes. So this movie had a lot of problems behind the scenes. He was frequently clashing with the director throughout the production. Eventually, he was fired. The movie didn't get edited and finished until like 2 weeks before it was sent to theaters on its prints. It was sent out as a wet print, which means that like they were brand new prints, basically, that really hadn't even seen the light of day or anything. The movie was pulled apart, put back together, pulled apart again, put back together again. The director wanted a more serious movie. John Peters wanted something that was more of a spoof. Both those things come through in the movie, so it's kind of weirdly at odds with itself.
But yet at the same time, I think it actually is one of its charms, I feel.
Yeah, I was going to say, and yet somehow it works, and it is way more charming than you're anticipating.
Right.
So this is a movie of contradiction within itself. It was a movie of contradiction within the entirety of its creation. Stallone had the original DP, Barry Sonnenfeld, fired from the film. Like, everything that could go wrong here went wrong here. Jeffrey Boehm, who wrote the Lethal Weapon movies, as we talked about quite a bit, actually came in to script doctor and fix it. He said it was one of the worst scripts he'd ever read and was trying to get it fixed and punched up. This movie had just about everything that could possibly go wrong on a production. And yet here we are almost 40 years later waxing poetic about this film because guess what? It held up.
It's a banger.
It's fun as shit.
Yeah. To the point where we're talking about a sequel, potentially at some point. I mean, it's a little old now, 2019. Arnold Schwarzenegger put forth the, I'm sorry, that's an in-joke. You saw Twitter.
Yeah, PLD yesterday while we were talking about Tango and Cash, while I was rewatching it, I had posted that I wish they had made a sequel. And it wasn't for fraught that I didn't know that, like, Stallone has floated the idea, like he's floated ideas for most of his career of trying to sequelize things, but he's talked about the potential of wanting to do it. But I know that Kurt Russell's less enthused about doing it, so I was just chalking it up to I was sad that it never happened. But PLD and his good intentions let me know that Arnold Schwarzenegger had said that he was working on a sequel.
To be fair, I want to say I was definitely in the middle of like 500 things at once. I was editing, I was scheduling out something, I was writing something else, I was answering texts. I saw a tweet, answered the tweet real quick, and as always, I just made Stallone Schwarzenegger, and in my mind it worked, and here we are.
I mean, I know Stallone. I don't blame you. It makes sense to me. You know what? One of my favorite things about this movie is, though, we haven't really gotten into it yet, but one of my favorite things is this movie is littered with like a who's who of character actors.
Absolutely.
And people that you recognize from everything. Like, that is part of what's super charming. Of course, James Hong is Quan. He's one of the villains of the film, and it's like James Hong is always just one of those guys that I'm happy to see in anything. But this movie has the great Robert Zadar of Maniac Cop 1 through 3 fame as Face, who is
Yes.
frequently called Conan the Barbarian in the movie, which I think is very funny. And once again, like right in the middle of the Planet Hollywood feud days where Stallone, Willis, and Schwarzenegger were frequently taking shots at each other within their movies.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always loved that little bit because it makes me laugh every single time. But Robert Zadar, man, like I've talked about it on here before. I fucking love Maniac Cop.
Yes, you
Like
do.
I just straight up love Maniac Cop 1 and 2. 3 is a movie that exists and is
Fair.
not the best, but Maniac Cop 1 and 2 are just so fucking great. They're two of my favorite slasher movies. And that's like one of the few times Zadar got to be like a star. But in this one, it's kind of funny to see him because I forgot he was in it. I've only seen Tango and Cash a handful of times.
Right.
It was not a movie that I actually grew up with, like unlike the Lethal Weapon movies, which kind of built me. I didn't see Tango and Cash until it hit Blu-ray, I don't think.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so, yeah, it was actually one of the early Blu-rays that I think I bought when it hit, but I had never seen it. So I didn't even remember that Robert Zadar was in this until I was rewatching it last night.
That must have been a great
And
scene.
he
Like,
popped up, and
oh!
I went, "Oh my god, it's Robert Zadar!" And my mom was like, "Who?" And I was like, "Maniac Cop." It doesn't matter to you because my parents had never seen this, and I'm gonna be honest, I've had like a week from hell, and I didn't know if I was even gonna have time to get the movie in, and I had left the dogs the last couple of weeks with my parents because I just haven't been home. I'd just been really busy.
Right.
And so I went over to my parents' house last night to pick up the dogs and to come home. But I stayed for dinner, and usually if I do that, like I'll stay and we'll watch a movie or something. And I was like, I have to watch this goddamn movie for the podcast. Like it's been so long, I don't remember it.
Right.
And so I put it on, and he popped up, and I was all Robert Zadar, and she was like, "Who?" And I was like, "It does not concern you because you've never seen Maniac Cop." And she was like, "That's a thing," and I was like, "It has the greatest tagline of all time: you have the right to remain silent forever." Like, come on, man! Maniac Cop is great.
I'm honest with you, I have not watched those movies in forever, so I have to do a
Oh
rewatch.
man,
It's been a long time since I've watched them.
dude.
I
gotta be
like them.
on
I watched them. I just haven't watched them in a while. That's all.
Oh, I know. I'm just saying, you got to, because there was a little while I was watching. I think it was during COVID, and like when I started rewatching Last Drive-In,
right,
they had Bruce on because they did Maniac Cop 1 and 2.
right.
And Bruce was on for the first one, and I watched that episode more times than I should probably admit to. While it was still on Shudder before it went away. Now it'll probably come back around. Like they cycle through that stuff pretty frequently, but
Right.
like I watched the first Maniac Cop quite a few times just because they had that version of it on there. And then I bought the 4Ks of 2 and 3 that they released last year.
Of course you did. Of course you
Because
did.
of course I did.
Of course. I remember Raymond Zadar, Robert Zadar from a little movie called Beastmaster 2 Through the Portals of Time.
Oh yeah.
As a big Mark Singer fan from back in the day. So yeah.
Who doesn't love the Beastmaster movies?
I don't know. People who are dumb, obviously, who don't know great cinema.
Yeah. Speaking of great cinema, can we talk about the fact that Jack Palance is like another 80s villain? His whole career became nothing but playing like shitty villains in the 80s.
Yep, pretty much. But what a great... his dialogue alone. He's got like that kind of like, he's like, I don't want to say poor man's Christopher Walken, but he just has that speech, the way he speaks, like just makes you want to listen to more. Tango and Cash, Cash and Tango.
He's so fucking hysterical in this movie. And one of the things that I love about him in this, and him is his whole career, Martin Sheen kind of ended up modeling his own career, it feels like, after Palance. And in a perfect world, I could see Sheen playing this villain in this movie a decade later. If, say, it had never happened in the 80s and they made it, that would 100% been Martin Sheen.
Absolutely. You're not wrong. You're not wrong there. This is great because I did live in this movie quite a bit. I mean, you didn't see it till Blu-ray. I had this on VHS. So this was like a long time, like alongside Lethal Weapon. I had these all at the same time. So this was basically when we talked about doing this stuff. We talked about doing Lethal Weapon franchise. We talked about doing Lethal Weapon like movies to kind of finish out because there's only 4 Lethal Weapon movies. We talked about doing Shane
basically
Black
Lethal
stuff.
Weapon adjacent stuff. Yeah.
Right. And you pitched all the Shane Black, and I was like, yeah, that too. I love the Shane Black idea, but I really wanted to throw this one in there because this felt like such a partner piece to me as far as the dynamics go. And I didn't even realize at the time doing that until I read about like the Jeffrey Boehm of it and all that kind of stuff. But to me, this was just right up there with the Lethal Weapon franchise. And I never understood how it didn't get a sequel. To be honest with you, at the time, it made no sense to me because it was successful enough. I believe it was like what it made like at least double its budget by far. Yeah, it was almost more than double its budget. It made 120 million. I felt like it could have been a good sequel to go off on, but
yeah, but I think that the production of it alone
absolutely
probably pushed them to not do it, which is understandable, all things being equal. But this wasn't like, it wasn't the most well received movie either. For either of them, that was probably a part of it too.
Yeah,
but the funny thing is it made quite a bit of money. It was one of the last movies released in 1989. The same day as Steven Spielberg's Always. They were the last 2 movies released in the 80s.
I gotta be honest with you. I love Steven Spielberg. I actually probably enjoy this film more.
I mean, this is the much more enjoyable movie by a lot. And I'm actually an Always apologist. If you've never seen Always, it's a very different movie for him, but it's got Dreyfuss, John Goodman, and just like this wonderful kind of otherworldly performance from everyone in it. And you kind of look at it and it's just really sweet and different for anything that he's ever done. And Audrey Hepburn in her final film performance, the fact that she actually even got to work with Spielberg is like just so dope to me because I've always loved Audrey Hepburn. I've had a crush on her since I was a kid. Like, who doesn't? Like, Charade is one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it's the best non-Alfred Hitchcock movie ever made.
That's a good way to describe it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. But if you've never seen Charade, please see Charade. That movie is bonkers fantastic. Yeah. But yeah, this is the much more enjoyable of the 2.
Yes.
Like, just straight up, it is. And there's nothing wrong with saying that. You're always going to have preference. I've probably seen Always more, but this movie is like, honestly, this movie is if you had a box of nerds, like the candy, not like you and I, if we were put in a box, but like the candy, and you laced that nerds with cocaine.
That's about right.
And then put them on top of a boombox that is playing 80s synth music, and you turn it up, and that starts bouncing up and down, and the cocaine nerds are popping and doing their shit. That is this movie in a nutshell. This movie is the quintessentially 80s action film that you've never seen, probably.
Yes. Yeah, for one, it feels like when you watch it, it feels like this must have been a big blockbuster at the time, and this must have been the first in a series of Tango and Cash movies. It feels like that. This feels like this is that 80s movie that made it big, and we're revisiting the franchise, and the 5th sequel is about to come out. But it never did because of the thing. And I think part of it is, honestly, I think the majority of it is, I'm going to call it what it is. Majority is it's great chemistry between Stallone and Russell. Like, they carry this movie on their backs. I watched it again, and the story is not like anything spectacular. It's not like anything.
The story's pretty much non-existent because it was rewritten so many times.
Right. It's basically archetypal tropes of these kind of movies. But you put these 2 together, and my God, they're magic. My God, they're magic. They're really at their height. They're at their height really at this point. They're both at their peak. Their peak level performances. They're both action stars, and they just fit their roles so well, which is impressive considering the role specifically that Sylvester Stallone plays, which is very, I should say, against type at that point. I mean, this is the guy who did Cobra a few years prior, where he was the badass guy with the leather jacket. He's the strong and silent type. He played Rambo, and here he is playing a stockbroker. Like he's the
He's a
Danny
cop
Glover
who is
guy.
also a stockbroker.
Right, exactly. And he definitely plays the Danny Glover-esque role in terms of the straight man, the more, shall we say, by the books kind of guy, to Kurt Russell, who, quite frankly, I watched this, and maybe it's because I just watched the Lethal Weapon franchise, almost looks like Riggs in this
Yeah.
film. It feels like Riggs in this film without the suicidal tendencies, so to speak, without the drama side of
100%.
it. Because there's no drama here. This is not a drama. This is where the Lethal Weapon side gets taken out. There's not really a dramatic portion of this movie. It's all about the action comedy. And that's okay. It's because it is what it is. It's just what's trying to be.
Oh, 100%. And it works so well. It's so funny seeing the two of them together because you can tell that they had fun working together
Yeah.
overall. And I think that chemistry largely is what ultimately makes the movie that great.
Mhm.
It's just so goddamn charming. And that's ultimately why I enjoy watching it. I don't revisit it a lot because I'm not usually the kind of person who says this, but like it's so paper thin at times that I'm just kind of like I wish there was more. Because I like them and I can see kind of the holes in the problems that happen behind the scenes as I watch it, and I feel bad because I feel like the movie could be more, but
Okay.
it still works really well regardless.
For me, in a way, and maybe this is me being very forgiving for it, but I almost feel like it having less of a story actually works to its advantage sometimes because you're able to tell you a lot of you're able to showcase exactly what you need to know, and they don't have to waste time on a lot of other things. Like this film does a great job of setting up who's who, what the relationship is, where we're going, and give you enough like lead you along the way. We know what's kind of coming here and there, but we know what needs to happen, and it kind of leads you there. It's hard. I feel like it could easily have gone the other way and been like weighed down if they tried to make too much of a story out of it.
And you're not wrong. I think it's a balance thing
Yeah,
ultimately, and it's one that I don't think it really has by the time it's over, and that's not the fault of anyone involved. It was just that no one was on the same page while we were watching the movie
right,
or making the movie. I mean,
right.
like at the end of the day, I enjoy watching it, but you can tell that there's some stuff there that happened. But the funny thing is that the opening of the movie was reshot, and it makes me wonder if part of the reason that it was done that way is that someone was sitting around watching Police Story and they were like, that scene with Jackie Chan where he has dudes fall out of the bus. What if we did that? Because they kind of just rip it off.
You
And
really
it's
do.
the same way that Michael Bay straight up rips off the other part of that opening for Bad Boys 2. Like, I love how influential Jackie Chan was in the 80s to the point that people didn't realize just how much people were aping the things he was doing for American blockbusters. And this is
Absolutely.
one of those times. And again, it had been a bit since I had seen it. And so I had kind of forgotten about it. And it started to play out. And I went, wait a second. This is straight up just the opening to Police Story, but without the downhill chase.
To be fair, though, it's funny. I think Jackie Chan appreciated that because he actually was
He used it in
inspired
Super
by
Cop.
the
Yeah.
zip line thing in Super, which is
Yeah.
great. I think that's what makes you love Jackie Chan so much because he can take that and go, "I see what you did there. I kind of like that. I'll use that as like a nod
Yeah.
back to you anyway." So
Oh, 100%. Like, and again, it's no shade or anything. It's just true. It was a
right,
thing that happened. Like, nothing wrong with it. It is what it is.
right.
No one, it's not like he sued anyone for them doing it.
No, absolutely
So
not.
there's no real bad blood. The only thing that makes me sad is that he was never prime Jackie Chan in a movie with prime Stallone. Like,
Oh yeah.
dude, imagine if they had made a movie together.
Oh my god.
And
Ooh.
it came close to happening a couple of times. He was supposed to be one of the Expendables. At one point, that movie he made, Skip Trace, was going to be him and Stallone. Then it was going to be him and Cena. It ended up being him and Knoxville, directed by Rennie Harlan.
What a weird choice that is.
Yeah, and that's not a great movie, but like
No.
you think about it, and it's like Chan kept kind of flirting with any sort of American fame in like the late 80s going into the 90s, and it even even then it wasn't until Rush Hour. It took Rush Hour for him to really break big over here. And that's wild when it's like guys like Stallone were trying to give him an up and up and even being like, dude, he's doing incredible stuff. Why are you guys not watching it? Here's an homage to it.
And Tarantino, of course, tried to talk him up as well. Absolutely.
Like that stuff was crazy. So it's kind of funny seeing the opening of the movie though, and there's that, and then it feels like Cash doesn't really have an opening, and he's just there. You know what I'm saying? Like Cash doesn't get an introduction like Stallone does,
right?
But he does. But he doesn't.
Yeah. He does, but he doesn't. It's you're not wrong. It's yeah, it's true. But before you go on to that part of the intro, of course, I can't not mention one of my favorite lines. It's cheesy as all hell.
The Rambo's a pussy.
Pulls out, the whole thing, he thinks he's Rambo. Rambo is a pussy.
Yes, hearing Stallone say that Rambo is a pussy is very hysterical. And it's funny because Rambo 3 hasn't even come out yet at this point.
Right, like, exactly. It's like,
though you can tell underneath all that stockbroker where he's in Rambo shape for the third movie because he's getting ripped for Rambo 3 already.
Absolutely. I can tell later on because he has the undershirt on during the prison sequences, so you know exactly what he's all about at that point. But
but it's just really funny and it makes me laugh like every single time.
But then the Cash's opening, which is funny, or his opening sequence, it's kind of funny to me because the Harold Findermeier score, the 80s synth score, in a way kind of works against it sometimes because it almost feels like it's too comedic.
It's too much at times. It really is.
And that's part of the problem because all of a sudden Cash comes in and he's like, doom, 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 doom. And you're like, what are you doing?
Yeah, it's almost like bumpkin techno.
Yeah.
Like that's the best way to describe it. And you're like, what just happened?
What is going on here? Luckily,
the score in this movie is wildly all over the place.
I think part of that has to do with the production. I think that he's seen the different styles that I wanted to do. I think sometimes he leaned in towards the Peter's spoof version of it, and sometimes he tried to lean more towards a Beverly Hills Cop kind of action comedy thing that he did so well. But it did at times maybe take me out and go, yeah, I would have done something different there.
Dude, could you imagine if this had been like an Eddie Murphy movie?
It feels like it could have been at times. It really does.
It really does. It feels like a Beverly Hills Cop style cop movie.
It really is. It feels, honestly, if I take two franchises, it's Beverly Hills Cop meets Lethal Weapon. That's what it is.
100%. And I kind of dig that, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm all on board with that.
It feels like Tony Scott should have directed this, too.
Oh, if Tony Scott would have directed this, it would have been much more remembered, and it would have been, oh, God.
I also think then you wouldn't have a lot of the issues that you run into behind the scenes, although he would have probably wanted a more serious movie than Peters wanted, and that probably would have played a part in it too. But like this is a Tony Scott movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
It feels like a Tony Scott style 80s action film.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot in there that you could make into it that Tony Scott would have taken this and ran.
Well, Beverly Hills Cop 2 is the best of that franchise for a reason.
Absolutely. 100%.
Just saying.
Like, I have 100% agreement with you on that.
So, but one of the other things that's kind of fun about this movie is even though it's paper thin, the action's really great. And I just love that they kind of go for it and let these two just have all these like wild action beats and one-off moments with a bunch of character actors. Like it never takes itself so seriously that it ever feels like a real thriller. It's a comedy first and foremost that happens to be full of action, even though the prison sequence is also pretty dark and kind of fucked up. Like they straight up torture them in that.
Totally electrocute them at the same time. And there's moments out of there that are pure drama. Like there's the Anton movie, like when of course when Mr. Zadar, Mr. Face, and also by the way Mr. Brian James, classic 80s Fifth Element villain, a couple movies like that. Actually looks like he's straight out of a Die Hard movie. Kind of feels like he's from Die Hard.
Yeah. He straight up does. And we haven't even mentioned the fact that the great Clint Howard is also in this as
I was
Slinky.
going to say that absolutely. I was and that's a great role as Slinky. But that whole thing when they get him tied up and like they start dipping him down, and Sylvester Stallone has this great moment of just fuck you, and it's so like intense and like and almost out of place when you hear like the score like earlier on in the film is a different complete switch of tone. But yeah, they make it work. They make it work.
Yeah, and actually, I think that the prison stuff in the movie is actually some of the most thrilling overall because I think that's
yeah.
I think that's kind of the movie at its best balance.
Right.
To be honest, it never quite lives in that world again once they're out of the prison sequence.
Yeah, it's definitely
which
a
is
third act.
kind of a bummer.
It definitely goes a little bit downhill after that second act. It all starts. My favorite part, I think, begins in the courtroom. When after they get set up, they have these sequences together where they really start interacting, and that's the key moments. I think the point where I would point to is like this is the highlight of the film starts here, is when Tango makes his statement in the courtroom.
Oh yeah, and then Cash does.
Just like, Cash, do you have something to say? He's like, yeah, no, yeah. Well, I was gonna say he's very eloquent here, but as far as I'm concerned, this whole thing, well, fucking sucks. It's the worst on going on.
And everyone starts clapping and cheering because all the cops also know that it's all bullshit and that they've been set up at that point. Like,
right there, that's the beginning.
And it's so funny that this whole thing, like, James Hong basically tells Jack Palance, he's like, why don't we just kill them? At least they'd be out of our hair and we'd never have to deal with it again. And Palance is like, yes, but if you kill them, then the cops will be looking for us. But if we take them out of our way in a game that only we can win, and he does it in like such a Jack Palance sort of way. And it's like, but James Hong is right. Just kill them.
Yeah, it's like, this whole like they try to play it like we'll be martyrs and it'll be worse for us and stuff. And if we take it down, they'll lose hope. And it's all this very vague nonsense. But because you have someone with Palance's caliber, he makes you almost believe it enough that you're kind of like, okay, well, I'll go in, I'll buy it.
All the same, you look at it and you're just like, but also he's not wrong. Like Hong should have just murdered them, and the movie is over like very quickly if you do that.
100%. I won't lie there.
But I think it's one of those like funny 80s action movie bad guy things where it's like, yeah, just kill the dude. Like it's really simple. Even when you look at Die Hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hans is always like, just kill him. He's one man. Why is this such a problem for you guys? Like anytime you watch one of these, the villain who's always like, why don't we just kill the dude, is always the one who's right. They can never do that thing because, of course, the movie would be a lot shorter if it happened that way. Right. But like ultimately, it's not wrong. Just kill them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the fact that Jack Palance, who has a weird obsession with mice, by the way.
Yeah, I wrote that down too. I'm like, what's with the mice necessarily?
They never explain it. He has a weird obsession with mice. He thinks they're cute and he cuddles them. It is a character trait that is really a thing in this movie.
I think he's trying to make like a Bond villain with the cat, maybe. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know, but it's so odd.
It is very, very odd. You know what else?
He also built that like big desk for them that has like a mice maze in it. And you half expect that he's putting them in there and there's going to be like a snake or something and like he's setting them up.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because he's talking about how Tango and Cash are going to be these mice in their maze in their game and that, they won't be able to get out.
Right.
But he puts them in the little maze thing and then he goes, aren't they cute? And he's just admiring the mice. That's it.
That's the whole thing. It's so strange. I don't know. I can't explain that one, but
sometimes, I gotta be honest with you.
Sometimes those quirkiness things though make a movie better because like they make you look about it, you start laughing at it a little bit. You're like, oh, that's kind of fun. It makes you. It's memorable. It's memorable.
Oh, it's totally memorable. But I'll say this: I had a really sad realization that I had never had before while I was watching the movie.
The mice never made it out.
The mice never make it out. The whole building goes boom. Those poor mice didn't deserve to die.
That's right. It's not their fault. They're just being cute little mice.
I know, man. They were just living their best lives and doing their mice things in a maze. And somewhere Jack Palance was putting them in that maze. He should have known better. Those mice deserved a better home. Now they are
100%.
blown to bits because
They don't
Jack
know.
Palance was a jackass.
They don't know how bad of a guy Jack Palance is. He's their guy that cuddles them and treats them well. So
I feel bad for those mice. They didn't deserve that, man.
You know,
I legitimately had that thought while I was watching it. Like the building blew up, and I went, "Man, what about the mice?"
you know what else is weird, by the way? Just totally different, bizarre thing. We were talking about bizarreness. So they get set up for killing a federal agent,
Yes.
and they get 18 months.
Yes.
18 months for killing a federal agent.
You know, that was before inflation. So
even like that guy going, that's a short sentence for a company killing a federal agent. Okay.
Yeah. I thought the same thing. I was like, 18 months seems relatively low, all things being equal.
Well, yeah, I'll kill that guy for $1 billion in 18 months. Yeah, I'll be back and see this.
The funniest thing to me, though, is that early on, Kurt Russell even goes, someone's messed with my sight. He knows someone has messed with his gun.
Yes.
And like not a single person, because, you know, so many of them are in on it. But then there's clearly a bunch of cops who are not in on this. So you would think someone would listen and be like, wait, your sight's off? That seems weird.
Yeah. That's the thing. I guess he does get distracted by having to interview the guy who tried to kill him.
Yes.
And some of that, you know, we know some of that doesn't age very well, but that's okay as far as it goes. But so I guess that's what you can say is that he saw it and then he got distracted and never came back to it until all of a sudden 2 weeks later. But they never mentions it again. Really, he never mentions it again, which is
that's the thing. He never mentions it again until it's like, wait, this is my gun at this murder scene. Yeah. That might be weird.
Yeah, somebody mentioned my thing, and then all of a sudden it's here. But yeah.
You know, but again, action movie trope thing, but it was just one of those like very odd things that I noticed where I was like, that's so interesting in a weird way that I was not anticipating out of it.
Right.
But one of the things that I really enjoy too is that looking at this movie now, you could never make it this way.
Right.
There would either be the serious version of this movie or the straight spoof version. Right. There's not going to be a lot of in between. So the thing that makes this movie almost special is the fact that it's living in this like nebulous world of, is it a comedy? Is it an action movie?
Right.
Are they spoofing themselves? Are they just being meta? Like, how are we operating? And that like nebulous version of itself almost makes it stand out more.
Yeah,
because you couldn't make that really now. Like the Jump Street movies are a perfect example, right?
Right.
They are strictly spoof movies of the genre.
Right.
They happen to have action and comedy, but it is strictly spoofing. Right. This movie was not necessarily being made by either side.
No, it's exactly because it does some straight spoofing and it does some very not absolutely trying to be serious about itself. And it just keeps bouncing off each other. Luckily, it remains kinetic enough where it doesn't ever drag it down. That's the important thing. It just keeps going and keeps kind of taking you along on the ride with you. So that you never slow down and make you think about it. After the movie's over, you're kind of like, interesting bit. That's an interesting bit. That okay, I see where you're going there. But it remains entertaining. That's the important thing.
No, it totally does, and I love it for that. The third act is like real bonkers. When I was talking about the nerds on cocaine thing, it really, really goes to that third act because the whole scene with them in like this undefeatable A-team style mobile unit when they go into this old Air Force base and they're riding around in the quarry is just batshit bonkers.
Oh yeah.
And the thing is like it's a lot of car action in a movie like this that you're not used to really seeing, and there's so much happening and it almost feels chaotic, but at the same time I can't help but love it because they're quipping back and forth, and my lord, does this movie have how many one-liners within it?
I think that's what keeps it entertaining. It is one-liner after one-liner after one-liner after one-liner.
Yeah. But between that and then they have like a third person who's on the call, and it's the guy like who's basically a part of this because
it's the spoof version of Q.
Yeah, it's the spoof version of Q. And he's on like phone call somehow with them in 1989,
right,
giving them information and stuff like that. It is so hysterical to me.
I love that actor, by the way. Same guy's in Scrooged.
Yeah,
he's wonderful at what he does. And actually, that was one of my favorite one-liners of the whole thing. Because obviously he's friends with Cash when he has a couple of great sequences in there. He has the exploding dog. It's like a security thing. Like his things go wrong for elderly people. And then Cash, they get this 18 mobile unit that's like fucking awesome looking. And especially when it looks at Tango looks at Cash and goes, "He's not family, is he?" Maybe.
Yeah, he won't give a definitive answer on that.
I love it.
Which is great.
Very Kurt Russell delivery. Very Kurt
Russell delivery. But it's funny because you look at it and the action beat is so starkly different than the film's second half, which feels like a prison film with like intense hand-to-hand combat and like legitimate stakes.
Right.
And then this is more like a Fast and the Furious movie, to be honest. Once it gets to like Fast 8 levels of chaotic car carnage.
I gotta tell you, I feel like if we ever looked at the script, like the whole third act is basically Corey action sequence. One line. Do things.
Yeah. Do thing. Yeah. Like that's pretty much it. I would almost guarantee. And it's so funny, like knowing that they reshot the beginning. I honestly would have thought that was the ending that had been reshot. You know what I'm saying? Because it's so chaotic and just so like explosions here, explosions there. Here's an explosion for you. There's an explosion for you. Like the movie never stops at any time, and it's just kind of wild watching it happen. And then it would cut to Jack Palance being like, "Someone kill them," and he's just keeps screaming it like he's Michael Sheen. I will find him.
I will find him.
That's kind of what Jack Palance is doing while he's seeing all these people not killing these guys. And at that point, you think, Palance, why don't you just leave?
That's a great point. That's a great point.
Just leave.
At some point, well, maybe he just can't leave the mice behind. He has no way to take care of the mice. That's what it is.
Yeah, but if you see these guys coming, I'm taking the mice with me, and I'm getting the hell out of Dodge.
Right? Absolutely.
Like, Wyatt Earp is already on his way, man. Get out.
Well, one of the things I think that made it so different feeling is this is actually where the director was canned, was before this. Because Albert Magnoli came on and basically filmed all the stuff at the end. That's what happened. So at this point, that's why it felt totally different, because it's a totally different director doing it at that point.
You can tell.
You can absolutely tell. And it's funny how this is where Brian James elevated himself so well. He actually mentioned in an interview that it was partially the Cockney accent that kind of like made him stand out, which it does. It added a lot to the humor. But it got to be like he made himself get a bigger part, to the point where at the end he was almost more of the bad guy than Jack Palance was at the end, because he's the action guy you could have them beat up with at the end.
Jack Palance. We got real fancy there, huh?
Yeah, well, Palance. I would say Palance. Sorry, I say Palance. I like Palance. I like better. But
I mean, we all make choices. I'll say I really love that him as a henchman, though. That's one of the cool 80s henchmen.
Yeah,
and it definitely feels like it's a diehard type of character. I will always love the line, though. You think he's telling the truth? I don't know, but it's not raining right now, and there's a puddle by him. What a good line.
Speaking of good lines, we actually haven't even mentioned the whole Terry Hatcher of it all. And
I was going to say, we had to talk about the Terry Hatcher of it all.
Because first of all, I had a very big crush on Terry Hatcher as a kid. She was definitely a girlfriend of mine, in my head anyway.
Yeah.
I was younger.
Superman and Lois for me too. So,
and this was pre-Superman and Lois.
No, I know, but for me.
I know. I'm saying this is where I met her, though. I feel like when I watched Superman and Lois, like, oh, that's Terry Hatcher. But what a great fun role she has with again, dynamic with her brother Stallone, and how the whole thing goes on. That ends up being like at least a quarter of the jokes between them after that. They have this like looks like a sex sequence. It's so exaggerated, like she's like rubbing his back and rubbing his like
putting his ribs back in place, basically,
or something, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And like, obviously, Sylvester Stallone comes in, sees it from one side, and it looks like they're having sex, and so like obviously overdone. Like no one does this, even when they're getting their back rubbed. Like so, it's just so obviously stupidly overdone, but it's great.
Yeah.
And it leads such a great more dynamic until we get Sylvester Stallone and Kurt Russell again over that. And that's one line, they're about to high five on the rooftop. Did you sleep with my sister? Did you bump uglies with my sister? And Cash, of course, is pulling the Han Solo of it all. He's pulling the Han Solo from A New Hope, like where he's like, "Oh, maybe I did, maybe I didn't," kind of thing.
Yeah.
Maybe I have feelings for it, kind of thing. And it drives him nuts. It's so funny. But again, actually, before I continue, that actually brings to mind one very big blooper that even when I was a kid, I saw it and it made me laugh still to this day. Right at this time, Sylvester Stallone walks in on them, then sees his captain outside the door, or he sees a shape outside the door, ends up being his captain, jumps on him, hits him down the screen door. The screen door obviously gets ripped out. You see his face, and the very next shot, the screen door is completely fixed.
Oh, yeah.
On top of him, like, whoops.
Someone wasn't paying attention continuity-wise there.
I also feel like they had the shot, like they had one take of it, and they go, well, he has to have the thing. We never got a take of it. We never got a take of it actually stopping with the screen on him. Well, I'll do it quick enough. They won't notice.
It's so good. And it's so funny.
And
Terry Hatcher's so good in this. I had this thought. But it's funny that Kurt Russell does drag in this.
He does. And
what a conversation to have about that type of stuff these days, because this is like such a fucking hot topic issue for whatever reason, when this stuff has been going on forever. Like, do people not remember Some Like It Hot? Do people not remember Bosom Buddies or this or Tu Wong Fu, like Mrs. Doubtfire? Drag has always been a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Like, I don't really understand the outrage over it. And here we are, another movie from 1989, almost, again, 25 years ago or 35 years ago.
Yeah.
Why are we having this conversation when Kurt Russell did drag in this movie?
I don't know. And he did a great humor. I thought it was an entertaining moment. It didn't do anything. I mean, I'm not sure what the issue would have been, but I'd never understand what the issue is, to be honest with you.
I don't either. I just thought it was very interesting because, again, having not seen it in a while, I forgot about that.
Yeah, I actually did too.
And then it happened, and I went, huh, because of all the conversation that has been going on around it, which just goes to prove that people are up in arms about really nothing of import.
Right.
Because, again, drag has always been a thing in many things that you have probably watched.
Right.
Until now.
Right.
And this movie, by the way, is all about the American dream and American morals and the idea of being the American action hero. Like, that's its whole thing.
Welcome to America.
Yeah, like, this movie leans on that, right?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Guess what else is a part of that?
100%.
I'm just saying. And it just, food for thought. I think some people could be reminded of that by watching this movie and then watching Mrs. Doubtfire and then watching Tu Wong Fu and going, maybe we're wrong about all this.
Are you saying that people take things too seriously nowadays?
Uh-huh. And maybe that trying to decide that all these people who dress up in drag are groomers and stuff are wrong. I don't know. Just throwing it out there. Like, I'm just saying.
Just saying.
Anyway, I felt like I needed to make that point because it was just a very specific thing that came to my mind as I was watching it.
Yeah, I know. I wrote it down too, right, for exactly the same similar reasons. It's like it's such a non-issue that it's kind of weird that it's such an issue now.
I know, right? Mabel agrees with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Mabel.
Another
thing I want to talk about real quickly before we get into things, and so I have one word for you, and that is FUBAR.
FUBAR, one of the all-time great acronyms in any movie ever to exist about anything.
And it's so cleverly done, and so I think actually FUBAR might outlive the movie itself, because I've heard FUBAR from different places and everything else, but they do it like so. It's so Kurt Russell. It's such a great delivery from him, and I love how they drop at the beginning. You're like, what does that mean? I don't get it. I don't get it. And finally, they say it, and he just sort of fucked up beyond all recognition. You're like, nice, gets the payoff that you deserve. And it comes back again, especially at the end when he finally gets the grenade back down the pants of Mr. Brian James. There, kicks him down.
Oh, dude. I love that moment, by the way, because one of the things this movie actually does really well, and we haven't really said it, it's great at setting up a thing and then calling back to the thing later.
Right. Yes. Absolutely.
It does it quite a few times, but that's one of the best versions of it because them going back to the hand grenade thing in that way is just so choice and so excellently done. And Russell looks like such a badass when he does it.
Oh yeah. It's one of those quintessential action type moments in a movie can make. Boom, boom, foobar, total foobar.
Yeah, totally.
You're right. They do bring that up quite a bit. And the other thing they even do that with dialogue too. Like there's 2 times that they do is that a proposal line?
Yeah.
Like
yeah, 100%. It comes back a couple of times. Like it happens throughout the movie, and I've always kind of dug that about it.
Right.
That's one of the things that I've noticed every time I watch it is that there's just a lot of little things throughout.
I think it's a way for a film, if they do it and they do it right, it's a way for a film to invite the audience in on the joke. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
It's an inside joke for you, the audience, in a way, even though it's all an inside joke for all of us watching, because a couple of the characters know who we know, we get to enjoy that. You have some of the others don't. So I think it's a clever way to do it. I like when movies do that.
I really do too. It's just kind of nice. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just kind of fun. It works. Man, this is just a fun movie. And at the end of the day, the action beats are super fun. The Stallone and Zadar fight is really great on the rooftop. That's one of the more tense action beats because you have Kurt Russell down on the other end waiting for Stallone to like get on the wire and actually zipline down, and his foot getting caught and having like this kind of fight sequence with Zadar. It's super great. That whole escape sequence is actually really good.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I love it.
I think that's my favorite part of the movie.
Yeah, and the whole, like I said, from the moment Kurt Russell says this fucking sucks until the escape, that's my favorite part of the movie.
Yeah,
and like the whole thing is pretty much nonstop action beats, comedy beats. You have the whole thing about like the whole walking in general population, then choking together. You get the torture scene, which is deep. You get Slinky, who is funny as hell. Clint Howard just does a great job.
I just look, if you put Clint Howard in anything, I'm gonna be kind of happy.
100%, absolutely. I even like some of the other. Like, I don't know if I'm very. I don't know if I know the guy who played Sikowski. He looked familiar to me. But even Sikowski, like as the prison warden or the associate warden that gets killed, Cash's friend, even he did a great job with a small role. Like, it's a nothing role, but I believed in him. I believed he and Cash were like friends for years. Kind of like it's just a lot of those kind of like actors who really just, when you put them in these kind of roles, they really like it's literally a support role, but it really does support the lead actors so much, and it makes such a difference. When you're not around, you can tell. When you have great actors like that, it really adds such texture to the film that you really enjoy the whole thing instead of just the 2 people in charge.
No, 100%, and it's why I think you and I have always been so big on character actors and the inclusion of putting them in literally anything. It's honestly why I even love the original Maniac Cop so much, right? Because look, Zadar is the villain of the movie, but that movie is populated with all sorts of character actors, not just Bruce Campbell, but you've got Richard Roundtree in there too, like super recognizable faces that you're like, oh shit, what are they doing there?
Right.
And when you populate a movie like that, it's super cool. It's why I love The Rocketeer also. The Rocketeer is populated with all sorts of character actors that like live in the diner outside of the Alan Arkin stuff. Like you look at that and you're like, oh shit, I recognize a bunch of those people because they're all dudes who just kind of pop up in things. And I've always loved that.
Wait a minute. You like The Rocketeer?
I don't talk about it much, but you know, I kind of have a soft spot for that movie.
I know. I'm still waiting for the day.
That's weird.
Ken Knapsack and Mark Ellis
that movie sometime.
kidnapped Zach and Mark Ellis during the last day of the Schmodown, Spectacular. They brought out the book they were writing about, and Mark Ellis threw out that we're going to have a Rocketeer sequel where Ed Harris plays the dad, and it's like the movie of both of our dreams.
Yeah, right. Well, everyone was prepared during the Schmodown too. They knew that I was gonna dig the Rocketeer in as much as I could. One last go. Ed Harris, Bruce Campbell. I'm still really proud of the finale. I think there was a lot of good callbacks. I go back and watch from time to time.
I do too.
Yeah.
I have certain moments. I watch all the Remember the Titans jokes. I remember the whole round one of the last one. Of the last match between Merle and Levine, and a bunch of other ones I watched. I still just watch a bunch of them. The Inner Geekdom stuff when we nail Smets with the Don't Tell Harry bit.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Oh, man. That was good stuff.
Yeah,
and yet I'm realizing we didn't have a single Tango and Cash question. We fucked up.
We did fuck up.
I'll say this, man.
I have it written for round 2, but never didn't get used.
There's times I sit there and I go, man, there's things I would have loved to do, and like it bums me out because now I can't do it.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like,
I know. I mean, I still do a little bit for Christian's Patreon, but even that's like just the old questions that I want to write new ones. So I feel like by looking like maybe I do want to write a new one just to get it done for a match here and there, but it's not the same. Not quite the same.
Nah, it's not the same. I just there's things I would have loved to do. I really would have, and it's just one of those things that we never really got the chance, and that's kind of a bummer.
And maybe someday. Never say never.
Maybe someday.
Never
I don't
say
know.
never.
We'll see.
But either way, back to Tango and Cash before we go on a totally different tangent, because we never do that.
No, us never.
Another character actor in this that I want to mention, or at least for a little bit part there, was Michael Jeter, who plays Skinner. And that what a great sequence that is. And Cash goes to the sound booth there. He kind of reminds me a lot, obviously, of Frank Oz. He's a very Frank Ozian kind of character.
Oh, he absolutely is. He's very Frank Ozian. That's a great comparison. I love Michael Jeter too. He's one of those dudes. You put him in anything, and it's Michael Jeter.
He just does his job well, and it makes he doesn't. The great character actors never blend in. They always stand out a little bit, but they don't stand out for the wrong reasons. They just stand out because they're interesting, and you want to know more about them. But they don't overdo it. They just do their job well. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly it. I mean, and Michael Jeter's in a bunch of movies like Jurassic Park 3, Fisher King, Open Range, Green Mile, Patch Adams, all this good stuff. Good stuff. But I do love that sequence. He comes over with the shotgun. He's like, one of my favorite lines of the whole movie at that point still is, I don't know how you're going to be the top guy when you're using such shitty equipment or whatever it is. He's like, this is state-of-the-art equipment. All right, I'll tell you anything. I'll tell you whatever now. So good.
It's just so good, man. This movie, like I said, it's just full of really awesome characters and people that you recognize, and just watching it, you just kind of smile.
Yeah, 100%.
Seeing them in it, and you just enjoy it. And it was funny, like watching it. Even my dad was sitting there, and he was like, "Man, this movie's just populated with people I fucking recognize."
Yeah. And I gotta tell you, like you mentioned before, how the storyline is a little paper thin. Yeah, absolutely. But in a way, it makes it a legacy sequel would be so easy to do, because you don't have there's no story you have to worry about. You as long as you get Sylvester Stallone and Kurt Russell back, you pepper in some of these character actors who are still around, and you get Terry Asher to come back. Like that's all you need, because you can make any story you want with these guys. It's just these characters together can make it work.
I'm about to say something on here that has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I want to get your reaction because I'm about to redo the thing that I just saw.
Oh, okay.
Chris Carter teases that Ryan Coogler is developing a new take on the X-Files.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is intriguing.
Yeah.
I don't. Okay, I color me intrigued.
I am like, yeah.
No, I mean, I had thought for the last couple months, last year or so, that I would love to have seen Jordan Peele's take on X-Files. But Coogler is a damn good choice.
This is, yeah.
All right. I'm on board. I'm on board. Let's see how that goes.
I need that. I need that to happen tomorrow.
Sweet, sweet.
All right, sorry, I had to toss that in there because I saw it and I was like, wait, what? Really? Yes, please.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, well, let's get back then. Is there anything else on Tango and Cash we have to talk about? Kind of went through everything. It is kind of a thin story as far as that goes. But anything else you want to touch base on?
Not really. I kind of covered everything I was hoping to cover
Yeah, I mean, we got the
and
roof
talk about. I
sequence.
mean, this is a fun movie, man. Like
It's
I
not a
have
depth movie. It's not a
yeah,
depth
there's not
movie.
a lot to talk about with characters or like things that it's trying to say because it's not trying to do any of that. It's just
No,
trying to be a purely fun action movie.
which is what it
Um,
does.
and it's good at it.
Absolutely.
It's a fun
Well,
fucking movie, man.
absolutely. Well, we can talk about then. Let's talk about what are we doing next week now, or next.
I,
I'm sorry, 2 weeks from now, I should say.
I believe 2 weeks from now, we're doing Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
We are doing Kiss Kiss Bang Bang for the
Kiss Kiss
Shane
Bang
Black
Bang
of
it
it all.
is.
The
We
Shane
were
Black.
gonna eventually try to do Last Action Hero, but unfortunately it fell by the wayside and
I guess
PJ
so.
has the sads about that. But that's okay.
Yeah, we'll do that another time. I feel like I remember when we talked about if we were going to axe one, we'd probably axe that one because that feels like we could find a different place for that, a different series we could do that in at
Yeah.
some point. I would like to do that at some point. It is a great, great movie, great fun movie to do. But yeah, we're going to do Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. We're going to do after that. We're going to do The Nice Guys, all on a journey to finish out our Lethal Weapon esque of the franchises, so to speak. We actually got some great news. Our patron, Kelly, KW, who initially pitched us to do the Pitch Perfect trilogy, has, let us off the hook, so to speak, kind of putting it back. She actually gave us a choice to do either John Wick or the Has Fallen franchise, and PJ jumped at the chance to do John Wick. Obviously, with Chapter 4 is coming out, it makes sense. So we will be doing John Wick series soon as well. And of course, we got Indy coming up. We got the
I'm
Indiana
so
Jones
excited. We
franchise.
have so much stuff to actually like be hype about now. And
Yeah,
I'm so happy.
I'm here for it. I really am. But speaking of Patreon, patreon.com/PLD Products if you want to support the channel more. I have some great names I want to shout out there. Jerry Morris, of course, that recently joined. Matthew Kearns, Maddie, love Maddie. Brandon Buckingham, Jeff Alterman, John Lestrina. Couldn't do it without you guys. Really do appreciate you and everybody who is a Patreon here. And if you do like the channel and you can't support on Patreon, that's okay. You can also support us by liking and subscribe, leaving some comments, getting us up on that algorithm. We are slowly making our way towards 500 subscribers. We recently hit 385, so we are slowly moving in the right direction. So we appreciate that as well. This is a great time to be on the channel. Got 2 Mediocre White Dudes, got Class Action, got Crown Jewels, A Journey Through Queen. We got Holy Snokes every week, a Star Wars podcast. A lot of Star Wars news obviously happening. Me and Maddie Gunner are going to be covering that all. Matt will be covering live from Celebration and review. I just had an interview with creator, writer, director Kenneth Johnson, which was a blast to do. I really had a lot of fun doing that. That's up on the channel already. But there's something special about getting to spend time with my friend and my brother, PJ Campbell, on 2 Mediocre White Dudes on
I
film.
like being here.
It's a lot of fun. So
Just saying.
where can the folks find you, my friend?
You know we didn't rate the movie, right?
We didn't rate the movie. That's true. I kind of was realized we usually rate the movies and we kind of compare them in the franchises and everything else. But I guess we should rate it anyway, huh?
Yeah, probably. I'm just saying we probably should.
All right.
I
Well,
didn't
then
want to say anything to you, but I was like,
you keep me in line. It's okay.
I do what I can.
I do kind of forget that sometimes. Like at the end, I'm like, all right, let's talk about what else we got to do. All right, let's rate the movie since we have no other things to talk about. Out of 1 to 11, since we always turn up to 11 on PLD projects, what do you rate Tango and Cash, PJ?
Look, man, it's a fun movie. It's a good movie. There's a lot to like about it. It's a little paper thin, so it doesn't got a lot of substance. Doesn't have a lot happening inside of its head. That's okay because the cocaine-fueled nerds do something for me with that funky techno score. I'm gonna go ahead and give this boy a 7.5.
It's a solid score.
It's a solid score.
Yeah, I think nostalgia is a hell of a drug for me. Again, growing up with this movie, so I probably, at a fun level, will give it more. But as a movie, as I watch it now and try to be like impartial and try to take nostalgia out of it, I'd also give it a 7.5.
Hey, look at us. How are we always on the same page?
We usually end up on the same page. For as much as we argue about some films, We always end up pretty damn close. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna lie.
Yeah, I know that some people think that that doesn't make for good television, but you know what? I would much rather we get along and enjoy our conversations
Throw
than,
some positivity out in the world.
yeah, fuck fighting. It's just not fun.
Absolutely. So now, where can the folks find you, my friend?
Twitter, Instagram, PJ_Campbell here, hanging out with this gentleman, doing the things, having a good time, and just living our best lives, man.
Absolutely, absolutely, and same here. @Paul_continues you on Twitter. You can find me all over PLD Projects channel. You can find me on helping produce the big thing on Christian Harloff's network, as well as occasionally stopping by Action Industries. Still, all the things, all the time. Love it. Yeah, just Spotify, all your audio podcasts. Leave us some reviews there as well, some ratings that helps out the channel quite a bit. YouTube as well, and yeah, that's it. Until next time, folks. Stay mediocre. Never underestimate the power of mediocrity.
Adios, muchachos.